This is DW News live from Berlin. Leaders from the Baltic states call on Germany for more support. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz is meeting his Baltic counterparts in Vilnius as they push for a stronger NATO presence in their countries. Also on the programme, President Zelensky says Ukraine's forces are outnumbered but holding out in Severodonetsk. The city is a key target in Russia's fight for control of the Donbass. Kyiv says its troops still have a chance to push back. I'm Phil Gale. Welcome to the programme. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz is in the Lithuanian capital Vilnius for talks with the leaders of all three Baltic countries, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia. He was welcomed by Lithuania's President Gitanas Nausėda. It's the Chancellor's first visit to a NATO country that shares a border with Russia since the Russian invasion of Ukraine began. Let's listen to what's being said at the press conference between German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and the leaders of the three Baltic nations.
And fighting heroically. The ongoing struggle is not only for the freedom and sovereignty of Ukraine, but also for the future of Europe. I believe that no one is under any illusion about Russia now. We must realize that Russia's military threat is not going to go away. It will remain a long-term threat to the entire Euro-Atlantic area. Russia is systematically bolstering its security at the expense of other sovereign states, brutally violating the fundamental principles of territorial integrity, national sovereignty, and international law. There can be no dialogue or cooperation, no appeasement or concessions to this imperialist terrorist state. We must seek a strong response from the democratic world, sanctions, accountability for the war crimes committed, and complete isolation. We must build a strong response and strengthen our defenses in the face of Russian threat. Today, with the leaders of Germany, Latvia and Estonia, we discussed Baltic regional security issues. The Baltic states are in a very sensitive security situation on the very front line of NATO. Maximum readiness and enhanced forces in our region serve as a guarantee for the security of the whole alliance. We agreed on the need to reinforce defense capabilities in the Baltic states by increasing the number of deployed troops, strengthening air and sea defense. Lithuania is ready to host more allied forces and provide the necessary infrastructure. We are grateful for the service and solidarity of the German troops, leading NATO's Forward Presence Battle Group in Lithuania. This month, at the NATO summit in Madrid, Lithuania expects decisions that will significantly strengthen the security of NATO's eastern flank. A shift from deterrence to forward defense, from battalion to brigade, from air policing to air defense. We must not hesitate to give a green light to Finland's and Sweden's membership in NATO. This will give a strong strategic impetus to the security of the Baltic region and the alliance as a whole. We must stand committed to NATO's open-door policy and demonstrate its viability to all countries that have Euro-Atlantic aspirations. It is a historic opportunity to make the alliance more powerful than ever before. In the face of Russia's war in Ukraine, Europe has demonstrated that it can come together and take the necessary decisions at a critical moment. Our unity is our strength, and we must continue on this path. This is very important. We cannot allow being set against each other. We must continue to support Ukraine with with all possible military, economic, and political means until Ukraine wins this war. An important political message that we must send as soon as possible is the granting of EU candidate status to Ukraine. It is time to state clearly that Ukraine belongs in the European Union. We have no moral right to lose this momentum because Ukraine is fighting for this fight with its blood. We will soon start discussing at the EU level the seventh package of sanctions, which I would like also to include an embargo on Russian gas. This is important both for restricting Russia's ability to finance the war and for achieving European energy independence. It must become the EU's strategic objective, which we can achieve by diversifying energy imports, investing in green energy, and improving infrastructure. Our determination, our ability to respond and make the right decisions now will determine the kind of Europe we will live in for decades to come. That is why we must do everything we can to defend our values and peace, to stay on the right side of history. We need to act, and we need to act now. Thank you. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz.
Ich freue mich über die Einladung hier nach Vilnius, dass wir miteinander
I'm very happy to have been invited here to Vilnius and to have this opportunity to meet the President, to talk to him at the bilateral level, although we have talked to him before when we met in Berlin. And today, we have continued our talks, very intensive talks. For me, a very important message is that we are demonstrating, in the face of Russia's aggression, we are demonstrating unity. The war that has brought this breakthrough when Russia broke all the rules that we have been abiding by for decades. These were the rules that were broken by violence. And the agreement on condemning Russia is related to all the consequences, such as bombing by Russia, the brutal aggression by Russia. Russia's aggression is really brutal, so I'm very happy today to be here. And I'm very happy to announce the decision that we have made last week in Bundestag last week, that we are allocating around 100 billion euros to a special fund, which means that we're going to have an opportunity to increase our armed forces. And if we are going to stick to our agreement, and if we are able to allocate 2% of the GDP to defense, it's going to be an opportunity to increase, to strengthen the German armed forces, Bundeswehr, and it's going to become the strongest armed forces in Europe and one of the strongest armed forces in NATO. As I've already told everyone today, I will repeat that by being part of NATO, we have made a commitment to defend every centimeter of the territory of the alliance. Therefore, I'm very happy that today we can hold talks about the common strategy of NATO, about the consequences, about the decisions that we have taken. And then it's very important that we have adopted a common agreement at the NATO level, that we have to ensure security together. And first of all, that applies to NATO's enhanced forward presence in Lithuania. As I've told to the President, and as I'm going to visit the troops, the German troops, together with the President, it's a very important aspect. We are going to increase our contribution by strengthening the eastern flank of NATO. And we are going to create a strong brigade. And we have discussed that together in our meetings, and we're going to have to work towards this direction. We have also talked about our reaction to Russia's military offensive, and we have to do everything to stop this. We expressed our solidarity. We are on the side of Ukraine, and we are going to continue to support Ukraine by providing it with arms. We're going to intensively support Ukraine. And this support will be provided as long as it is necessary, as long as Russia's aggression is stopped. We are also going to implement all the packages of sanctions that we have adopted. We have already adopted the sixth package of sanctions that's going to increase the effect of sanctions further on. We have clearly stated that the sanctions package is aimed at weakening Russia's economy, which should force Putin to end this war. Therefore, these sanctions are very important, and this is one of the main topics. It's also very important for us to have a global outlook, because a lot of countries over the world are also suffering from Russia's aggression. Those are Asian and African countries, which are also feeling the consequences of this war. We see that the prices of food are going up, and the prices of energy resources are also increasing, and that is also related to the aggression of Russia. Therefore, together with the United Nations, we are holding talks on how we could find ways to remove the blockade of Russia, to be able to take out the grain from Ukraine. Ukraine, of course, has to defend itself, and the fact that the grain exports have to continue doesn't mean that Ukraine has to suffer even further on. We had a meeting that only confirmed our continuity in our cooperation, our solidarity at NATO level, and our commitment to this goal. Thank you.
Latvian Prime Minister Krišjāns Kariņš.
Ačiū, Gitanas. Dankeschön, Olaf, Aita, Kaja.
Thank you very much for this very meaningful and fruitful discussion. Putin has achieved quite an unexpected result. An unprovoked war against Ukraine has resulted in Europe and the alliance coming together and fighting the force to stand together and oppose this brutal aggression. It is very important for all of us to continue supporting Ukraine. There are many different ways of doing this. First of all, it is the delivery of weaponry, different weapons, ammunition. We also have to continue these deliveries as well as humanitarian assistance and financial support, everything that the Ukrainian government needs to continue its fight and duties. For us, it is also very important to think in a political way about how to reinforce our support to Ukraine. Therefore, it is very important that the European Union should open up the door of opportunity to Ukraine and support it for a candidate status so that Ukraine could start on the path to the European Union. And we, Latvia, very well remember that such a signal sent by the European Union is very important, and it inspires reforms. So, as the Baltic countries together with Germany and NATO, our allies and partners, we have to strengthen our support to Ukraine so that Ukraine should win this war and Russia should lose this war. And we wish peace, we wish stability in Europe, and this can be achieved only if Russia loses this war and understands that it can never attain its goals by military means and aggression against its neighbors. It's very important for us to strengthen our national military capacities, to increase our spending budgets up to 2% of the GDP. This is a very logical decision and a signal sent to Putin that we will invest in our defense, we will continue improving our defenses. But that is not enough. We need to continue strengthening the eastern flank of the alliance, and especially the Baltic states, which due to their geographical position are in a very particular situation. So I would like to call on Chancellor Scholz and to thank him for the decision to reinforce NATO's presence in Lithuania through the presence of German troops. This will also make Estonia and Latvia stronger. We have to continue our work throughout the Baltic states so that we continue to strengthen NATO's involvement and presence. And we will continue developing our military capacities. We know that time is needed for this, but our allies, we know, will help us, and this is related to air defense and maritime defense. We know from our history, and we have learned from it, and we have also learned from our mistakes. And one of the main things that we have to remember is that when we stand together and united, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, not only them, the Baltic countries and the European Union and everyone in NATO, we cannot be defeated. We are an undefeatable force. We must continue to strengthen ourselves economically and militarily so that our children, our grandchildren, should never be afraid of any force to be used against them from neighboring countries.
Now the floor goes to the Estonian Prime Minister, Kaja Kallas. Dear Gitanas, Kristinius, and Olaf, thank you, Lithuania, for hosting this meeting. Every opportunity to meet and to discuss the security situation and how we can ensure our future is very welcome. Thank you, Olaf, for these historic decisions that were made by Germany to increase its military spending. It's a historic event, historic moment, and when Germany is strong, NATO is strong, and Europe is strong as well. I understand that it needed a lot of efforts. In 3 weeks, NATO summit will take place in Madrid, and it's very important for us that right decisions are adopted there in the summit, especially related to the reinforcement of the NATO's eastern flank. Russia's strategic goals have never changed, and its behavior will remain unpredictable. We have to clearly demonstrate to the aggressor that NATO has resolute and capacity to defend every centimeter of its territory. It gives us the possibility. We have to ensure that Russia would never think about any attack against our countries. We have taken action to increase our national armed forces. Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia have increased their spending. Estonia has increased it to 2.5% of GDP, and we really welcome the decision of Germany to reinforce it as well. We are very grateful to the Allied troops for the presence in the Baltic states. We have troops from the United Kingdom. However, it's clear that our defense has to go to a new level. Yesterday in London, I met the Prime Minister of the UK, Boris Johnson, and together we confirmed that the presence the NATO's presence has to be increased in air, land, and navy, and certain decisions have to be made in Madrid. Together with Germany, we have also discussed this topic, and we really appreciate Germany's efforts to boost the defense of the Baltic countries. These are very strong signals stating that the Baltic countries are not alone. The German leadership is going to help in Madrid to adopt right decisions that are going to ensure NATO's readiness for future challenges. Ukraine also needs decisions adopted by the free world. It's the time that we can change the course of the war. Ukraine needs more military support, especially arms, and they are necessary to fight Russia. Olaf, we're very grateful for your decision to send arms to Ukraine. In order to defeat the aggressor, the timely support is necessary. In Estonia, we received 155mm howitzers. It's very important, and it's very important to give the possibility for Ukraine to become a member of the EU, so that by implementing its reforms, it can become closer to the European Union level. It's an opportunity as well to send a signal to Ukraine to show that the European door is open to Ukraine. And hopefully it will be open in 2 weeks in the European Council. We have to ask ourselves, if not now, when? To stop the Russia's offensive that is financed by oil and gas, we have to increase our energy independence and to ensure good prices for our residents. For that, we need to develop renewable energy capacity. In that aspect, Germany and the Baltic countries have a lot of points of cooperation, especially in terms of developing wind energy in the Baltic. We must never be tired. Ukrainians have never become tired. We have to make the right decisions for the security in our region, and I hope that these decisions will be adopted in Madrid. Thank you.
Mieli žurnalistai, dabar kviečiu užduoti klausimus.
And now your
Prašau
questions,
prieiti prie mikrofono, prisistatyti ir
please
nurodyti, kam
identify
adresuojate
yourself
savo klausimą.
and your outlet. And please also say whom your question is addressed to. Lithuanian National Radio and Television. I would like to ask Mr. Scholz about the delivery of armaments to Ukraine. You said that Germany is doing everything it can, but there are some doubts about this. Several months ago, Ukraine requested special rocket systems, but your government has not as yet decided to provide the anti-tank systems that Ukraine needs so badly. Ukraine also needs Marders, Leopards. And the media has focused on this issue and has pointed out that you are sending only light weapons to Ukraine, and Ukrainians have also expressed their dissatisfaction about waiting for so long and about all the promises that have been given. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this question. I would just like to deny this opinion. Germany is one of the main supporters of Ukraine in terms of military, and probably only the United States only provide greater support than us. Germany really provides a lot of aid to Ukraine. We provide Ukraine with large amounts of ammunition, also with armed military vehicles and systems, and the most modern howitzers will also be provided to Ukraine. Right now, the Ukrainian troops are being trained by Germans how to use the howitzers. So we are preparing all these commissions. Yes, media often covers something that is not in line with realities. For example, that Ukraine doesn't want some kind of arms, but that's not true. Actually, our allies and especially the United States, we confirm that we really support Ukraine, and the exchange of arms take place, for example, with the Czech Republic, with Greece and other countries. And Ukrainians will have full access to these arms. We really provide them with the arms that we can provide, and we do our best to contribute to this great support to Ukraine, so that Ukraine, thanks to all the arms provided to it, can defend itself. And the decisions adopted by me, that Germany, in the face of the conflict, decided to provide arms to Ukraine, it's a decision that we have been adopting on a large scale.
Inaudible.
No mic.
Kollegen richtet. Danke. Eine Frage, die sich an die baltischen Kollegen richtet. Verstehen Sie die Vorbehalte, die es bei großen westlichen NATO-Staaten gibt, moderne Kampfpanzer an die Ukraine zu liefern? Danke.
Was die letzte Frage betrifft, es liegt kein solcher Antrag bisher vor. Wir werden, wenn es einen gibt, den sorgfältig
Well,
prüfen.
when it comes to
Bisher
your
ist
last
es nicht
question, we will have to double-check this request. The second question, we have just adopted the sixth package of sanctions, and this is the largest package of sanctions that we managed to adopt. And this sanction package also includes the oil exports. And you know that Germany supports it, and we have taken this path. We have agreed on the sanctions related to gas imports, and we also are going to phase out the oil imports by the end of this year. We are doing surveys how these energy resources can be replaced. And we are getting ready to import oil to Germany by other means, whether by ship, by tanks, or other means. Germany also has a lot of refineries that are dependent on the Russian oil imports. However, we made a decision that by the end of the year, we are going to phase out the imports from Russia, and we're going to look for other ways to find the resources of oil. When it comes to gas, we will also have to adopt the necessary legal acts. And we have also made a decision to build LNG terminals. And this is the way how gas will be transported from other ports of Europe, for example, the Dutch ports. All our neighboring countries support this decision, that is, to construct an LNG terminal, because this decision will have a very significant impact. We have also made a decision that at the beginning of the next year we will be able to use the LNG ships. And from the perspective of Germany, we have to, first of all, ensure the gas imports from other sources, and we are doing it at a very large pace, to the extent that is physically possible.
Die Stärke ihrer Stimme war nicht groß genug.
I'm sorry. Ich hätte ganz gerne noch die Frage gestellt, ob Sie Verständnis dafür haben, dass einige große westliche NATO-Länder Vorbehalte haben gegenüber
I have asked you
Kampfpanzern an die Ukraine.
about the concerns of some Western European countries as regards the delivery of heavy weaponry to Ukraine. Let's say France, Germany, other countries are somewhat opposed to delivering heavy weapons. I think that there are some reservations here because the German Chancellor has very clearly negated this statement, and the information that sometimes crops up that military support is not supplied to Ukraine. It is delivered, and it is delivered in cooperation with the countries of the region. And these countries in their turn will receive some military support from Germany. And in Lithuania, we have a saying that let's not say that the situation is very bad. It might might be worse. So I believe that the Chancellor's declared support to Ukraine, I believe, is up to the fact, and Germany, as a NATO member, has assumed the leadership and delivers all of its promises and commitments. For me, this is very important.
Ačiū, prašau užduoti klausimą.
Thank you. Another question.
From Latvian Public Television, LTV. My question would be about communication with Russia, with Kremlin, between the West, and you have had Chancellor Scholz recently, along with President Macron, talks with Putin, discussions, and there seems to be differing points of view whether to talk or not to talk with Putin. So do you see, and also maybe other leaders can shortly answer that as well, do you see there is a point in talking with Putin, and what is the point in talking with Putin as one? And another question would be about recent statements of French President Macron about that we should not humiliate Putin and Russia. Are you in the same opinion? Thank you.
Schönen Dank. Ich bin fest davon überzeugt, dass das eine
Thank you
wichtige
for your
für uns
question. I
alle
am
ist,
convinced
dass wir einig gegen
that
die
all of
russische
us
Aggression vorgehen. Das haben
know
wir
that it is
miteinander
very
zustande
important
gebracht
for
mit
us to
mittlerweile
stand
6
together against Russia's
Sanktionspaketen, die wir auf
military
den Weg
aggression,
gebracht haben
and that together
und die die
we have
russische Wirtschaft
managed to
erheblich
implement
beeinträchtigen.
6 packages
Anders als
of
die vorherigen
sanctions. They will
Sanktionspakete, die
certainly
nach der Annexion
make a
der
huge
Krim und
impact on
nach
Russian
dem von
economy.
Russland
First of all,
angezettelten
the
Aufstand im Osten der Ukraine
packages
verhängt worden
that,
sind und die übrigens immer noch in
that
Kraft
were
sind,
adopted
ist es so,
after the
dass wir
annexation of Crimea.
jetzt sehr
They are
wirksame,
still
sehr weitreichende
valid.
Sanktionen haben, die sicher
And
dazu führen werden, dass die
now
russische
we
Wirtschaft um
have
Jahrzehnte zurückgeworfen wird,
adopted
dass
yet
sie am Fortschritt
other
der Welt, am
packages of
ökonomischen
very
und
tough
technischen Fortschritt
sanctions
nicht
that
teilnehmen
will
kann. Das
eventually
zeigt sich jeden Tag klarer und ist eine erhebliche
slow down
Beeinträchtigung.
Russia's
Wie
economic
wir mittlerweile aus
development
Berichten wissen, führt das sogar wegen
for
des
decades,
Missbrauchs
and this
ziviler
is huge
Exporte
damage
für
for Russia
militärische Zwecke
and its
dazu,
economy.
dass Russland auch nicht in der Lage sein wird, seine militärischen
Russia will
Kapazitäten
no
in
longer be
gleicher Weise
able
aufrechtzuerhalten.
to
Auch eine
use
unmittelbare Folge
civil
der
routes for
Sanktionen.
military
Und insofern kann man
purposes.
sagen, sie sind sehr effektiv gewesen. Das gilt auch für die
And
finanzielle
these
und
sanctions
humanitäre
will be
Unterstützung der
effective.
Ukraine, die von vielen Ländern vorangebracht
We are
worden
also
ist.
speaking
Deutschland
about
hat seit immer
financial
schon
and
sehr hohes
humanitarian
finanzielles
assistance to
Engagement für die
Ukraine.
Ukraine
Germany has
fortgesetzt. Gerade
always
erst haben wir
contributed a
verkündet, dass
lot
wir 1
to
Milliarde direkte
supporting Ukraine
Haushaltssubventionen an die Ukraine
in financial
überweisen werden,
terms.
möglich zu
1
machen,
billion of
dass
euros
das Land
in
durch diese große, schwierige Zeit durchkommt.
direct
Die Europäische
assistance
Union bemüht sich
payment
Unterstützung.
we
Die
made to
USA tun das.
Ukraine. The
Viele andere
European
haben das gemacht.
Union
Insofern
is
gehört es zu dem
also
Ganzen
delivering
dazu.
such
Und
support.
natürlich die hier schon
This can
sorgfältig
also be said
diskutierten
about the United States.
Unterstützung der Ukraine in ihrem Verteidigungskampf mit Waffenlieferungen. Es sind 3 Dutzend
And of course,
Länder, die das
support
mittlerweile machen.
for
Deutschland zählt zu
Ukraine
denjenigen, die
in
ganz vorne
delivering
dabei sind. Und
armaments
diese Waffenlieferungen haben
covers
dazu
3 main
beigetragen,
countries, and
dass der
Germany is
gesamte Plan,
one
den
of
Putin
the
mit diesem
3
Krieg
major
verfolgt
states
hat,
that
bisher
provides
nicht aufgegangen.
military support to
Er hat einen
Ukraine.
einigen Westen, er hat eine einige NATO, er hat erreicht, dass die NATO ihre Verteidigungsanstrengungen verstärkt, dass Deutschland in erheblichem Umfang seine militärischen Kapazitäten
Putin has achieved the goal of uniting NATO even stronger. We are now reinforcing the eastern flank of the alliance, also our presence in the Baltic Sea region. Sweden and Finland have decided to join NATO, so these are the achievements by Putin through his military aggression against Ukraine. So Putin did not manage to occupy the whole of Ukraine, so he continues these brutal attacks and tries to achieve at least something, but the message is that he will fail.
Such
atrocious bombardments have not disrupted life in Ukraine, and we will not agree to the peace terms dictated by Russia. Therefore, for us it is very important, and it is also clear that the result of this military situation will be Russia's withdrawal of all its troops from Ukraine, and Ukraine will continue defending its independence. There are agreements to this effect. Putin cannot even imagine that such sanctions would be imposed and that such unity will be demonstrated. He does not understand that the Ukrainian nation and its president are totally right in this war, and we have to consistently keep to our position and to continue our dialogue and speaking to each other.
Es esmu pārliecināts, ka Putins
Thank you for your question. I am convinced that Putin will start talking only when he realizes that he is losing the war. So we have to do everything in our power to achieve this result. Ukraine must win the war, and we must continue supporting it militarily and economically. And at the same time, we have to impose the toughest possible sanctions against Russia. So Putin tried to humiliate others, but he failed in this respect, and he now has to suffer the economic and military consequences. The offensives performed by Russia now are the greatest humiliation to Russia itself, and it is very important in the West for NATO and for the European Union to stand united and not to start disagreeing among ourselves. Who is the bigger supporter and who is the smaller one? Proportionally to our economies, I would say Estonia is in the forefront. We have supplied financial humanitarian assistance to Ukraine, but it is not so important. The most important thing is that every country continues to support Ukraine to the best of its ability. So I would like to underscore very clearly that Germany has helped Ukraine very significantly, not only financially but militarily as well. And as Chancellor Scholz has just said, Germany will continue doing so. And the most important thing, let me repeat myself, is our unity, our coordinated stand, and our going forward. Our goal is very clear. Russia's war cannot be victorious. Russia must lose this war, and Ukraine will win this war, so then stability and peace in Europe will prevail once again. I will repeat once again that it is very important that the statement that we should not humiliate Russia, and I would say that there is no other means of humiliating itself more than starting this war in Ukraine. And we have said repeatedly that Russia has overstepped the red lines and it has stopped on the road towards democracy and civilized world. So our efforts have to be very clear, and we cannot say that we have to stand united and resolute. We cannot enter into Putin's chamber through the back door, and we cannot legitimize his and his actions. So in this respect, yes, we agree on many issues in Europe, but of course there are some issues that have not as yet found our full agreement. So I believe that fellow colleagues have the right to use and to try out every opportunity, but this is not Lithuania's position. We believe that it is impossible to speak with a leader of a state that is trying to redraw the map in the 21st.
Thank you. I will answer in English because the question was in English. Putin's aims and calculation has not changed. So Russia's calculation and aims in Ukraine have not changed. I think we shouldn't worry so much about what Putin or Russia feels. We should more be worried about how Ukraine holds on. Thank you.
So you're watching DW News live from Berlin. We're looking now at a press conference being held between the President of Lithuania, the Latvian Prime Minister, the German Chancellor and the Estonian Prime Minister. The German Chancellor Olaf Scholz is in the Lithuanian capital for this meeting with the representatives from the Balkan states. What we've heard over the last half hour or so is condemnation of Russia's aggression in Ukraine and a clear call for a stronger NATO presence in the Balkans, in the Baltics. Excuse me. Everybody talked about unity and support for Ukraine and and thanked Germany for the German troops that are currently reinforcing the NATO numbers in the Baltics. We had a lot of pushback as well from the German Chancellor after a criticism, implied criticism through questions from the press about the slowness or the lack of delivery of German weapons. So that's what's been happening over the last half hour or so. With me in the studio is DW's chief political correspondent, Melinda Crane, and listening live in Lithuania is our correspondent, Yuri Rushetto. So let's join Yuri first. Welcome, Yuri. So what are the big takeaways from what we've just heard?
Well, the German Chancellor said exactly what people here wanted to hear from him, Phil. Namely, he underlined Germany's more resolute stance on military and not just political support for Ukraine in the fight against Russia. This support is crucial. Scholz discussed the security situation for the Baltic states on NATO's eastern flank with the leaders of Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia. He said his goal was to send a signal, a clear signal of unity, of a united Europe and a united NATO to Russia in light of its war of aggression against Ukraine. Germany would stand with the rest of NATO, he said, and defend every inch of NATO territory. And Germany would also, he said, increase its military efforts in Lithuania up to the set goal of a brigade strength presence in the country. German Bundeswehr soldiers are stationed here in Lithuania within the framework of NATO's enhanced forward presence missions, leading a NATO battle group here.
And we heard in the questions, and certainly before this press conference, a lot of criticism for Germany and its provision of military aid to Ukraine. Is this visit likely to change that, to criticism?
Well, this journey of Scholz is now also very, very important for regaining lost trust. Scholz is meeting with the heads of state of Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, three countries, Phil, that joined NATO in 2004 out of fear of Russia. They all find little understanding for the German Chancellor, who even after the outbreak of war didn't do everything possible to help Ukraine in its fight against Russia from their point of view. All three Baltic countries share a land border land border with Russia, and they are, much closer to Russia than Germany. So today Olaf Scholz is facing the leaders of three countries that don't understand his policy, of waiting and hesitation, or didn't understand it so far. Like few others, the Baltic warned of the threat of a Russian invasion long before the war started, and they had also been demanding for an end to the German-Russian gas pipeline project Nord Stream 2 for years. And they had long been calling for Ukraine to be armed to prevent Putin from invading. So today's meeting is a very important meeting and a diplomatic effort to solve this loss of trust.
Okay, thank you for that. DW correspondent Yuri Resheta. Let's pick up that point about weapons with our chief political correspondent, Melinda Crane. We'll get your thoughts on the overall event in a moment, Melinda. But just on this idea of weapons and criticism from Baltic countries about Germany's previous position, he got support, Olaf Scholz, today from those leaders, but lots of questions about it, and he was pushing back quite hard, wasn't he?
Indeed he was. He made the point that, in fact, Germany is doing more than any other NATO member country except for the U.S. He said, he listed the various weapons and equipment that Germany has already supplied, also through this swap program that essentially is a roundabout where Germany makes a trade with another NATO member and they then send weapons to Ukraine. And he also said it's important to look at the entire package of what Germany's doing. So financial and humanitarian support for Ukraine, as well as military support. And in fact, the three Baltic leaders here at the press conference refused to be drawn into criticism when they were asked several times to comment on Germany's weapons deliveries. They gave quite diplomatic responses with, in fact, the last speaker saying, you know, let's not get into bickering about who's doing a little more and who's doing a little less. The fact is Germany is taking a leadership role, and certainly on the point of the German position in the supporting NATO's northeastern flank in the Baltic republics. They were full of praise and gratitude to Germany, with real commendation also of Germany's leadership, which is not necessarily something we've been hearing very often of late.
It's interesting that was the Latvian Prime Minister, Artis Karin, who was saying, well, let's not get drawn into who's doing more and who's doing less. But by the way, proportionately, we're doing loads. So that's the military. So that was Scholz pushing back on that. What else stood out for you from the last half hour or so?
Well, absolutely, where we're going in terms of NATO's presence in the Baltics. So let's start out with the position of the Baltics. As Yuri just reminded us, they are vulnerable. The Baltics in general are considered the Achilles heel of NATO, but especially Lithuania, whose southern border essentially is a very thin land corridor between Kaliningrad, the Russian enclave on the one hand, and Belarus on the other. So there is a real vulnerability there. Now, until recently, in fact, until now, there have been NATO battle groups in these countries. They were sent there after Russia's 2014 annexation of the Crimea, and these battle groups are generally about a little over 1,000 troops strong. Germany has the biggest presence in the Lithuanian battle group, but these are viewed as a so-called tripwire, as a form of deterrence, but not of defense. They could never defend the Baltic republics in the event of an attack, which is why the Baltics have been calling for some weeks now to significantly strengthen these battle groups. And what we've just heard today, and this is the real breaking news here, is that the discussions on increasing the size of these battle groups by up to 3 times what they have now are very well underway. Intensive negotiations apparently have been going on, and they are hoping that all of this will be signed and sealed at the NATO summit at the end of June in Madrid. Now, what's particularly interesting is that there were restrictions on the size of these battle groups incorporated into the so-called Founding Act between Russia and NATO, 1997, essentially putting on some limits as to NATO's presence in regions neighboring Russia.
So this was an agreement between NATO and Russia
yes,
about limiting NATO size.
The Baltic republics say that those restrictions should no longer apply because essentially Russia has destroyed all basis for this agreement by its aggressive action in Ukraine. And until now, the battle groups, it has been very unwieldy. They have to be rotated. There are certain limits on size, so equipment has to be taken out and brought back in, all very inconvenient and also making these battle groups vulnerable. And that apparently will change if this increase to brigade size is now signed off on in Madrid. And they clearly believe that that will occur. And it was very interesting to hear the Estonian Prime Minister say here, when Germany is strong, the Baltics are strong. That's a sentence many people in Germany would never have expected to hear. Germans are often very focused on the death and destruction they brought down over Europe in the Second World War and have the sense that what other countries are looking for from Germany is restraint. And what we heard here is no, we are looking for a much more active, much more proactive German leadership, and we're beginning to see it emerge. That was the message.
And what we also heard over the last half hour from the leaders of the Baltics plus Germany is not only a welcoming of Finland in its application to NATO, but a call for the EU to give Ukraine a candidate status.
Absolutely. On the welcoming of Finland and Sweden, that's another issue that will be on the agenda at that Madrid summit of NATO at the end of June, making this the most important NATO summit for decades. And clearly they are arguing for that because once Sweden and Finland are admitted, the Baltic Sea essentially becomes a NATO sea. And that is a very major strategic change for Russia. That's why they were all saying in this press conference, Putin may have thought he'd get less NATO, but he's getting more. On the EU, very, very clear support from all three for open door, as they said, to Ukraine, for it to get candidacy to become an EU member. But that is not going to happen anytime soon.
And not a quick process either.
No, getting into EU is a long-term process, and therefore it's no short-term solution to Ukraine's plight, that's for sure.
OK. Melinda Crane, for now, very concisely and clearly put. Thank you so much. You're watching DW News live from Berlin. Let me remind you of our top story, what we've been looking at across this last hour or so. The German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has said that his country is ready to increase its military mission in Lithuania. He was speaking from Vilnius, where he met with the leaders of Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, which all border on Russia, and have been calling for an increased NATO military presence in their countries. But don't forget, you can always get DW News on the go. Just download our app from Google Play or from the App Store. That'll give you access to all the latest news from around the world, as well as push notifications for any breaking news. That's it. You're up to date. That's our special coverage of the German Chancellor's visit to the Baltic states. More on that across the day and around the clock, of course, on DW.com or on the DW app. Have a good day.
Of the season. An emotional roller coaster. Dreams that come true. Tears of joy.